Hi everyone and welcome back to ThoughtSmith US History Edition. It's your boy, Mr. Smith, and today we are going to be talking about conspiracy theories. Now, I have a little bit of a different lecture for you guys today. Today we are going to be joined by a special guest. So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and jump into that. I hope that you guys really enjoy this. Please make sure to watch for the end. I think that you guys will have a good time. So, here we go. All right, so today we are joined by Elijah Herrera. Elijah Herrera is a cybersecurity officer, or what would be considered a system administrator, and he just happens to work in the cybersecurity field. He's about to finish up his bachelor's in cybersecurity and information assurances. So he's going to be joining us today as we talk about conspiracy theories. So as a general rule of thumb, whenever we are diving into any topic, we need a general definition of what we're going to be talking about. So the first segment of this and the first question is going to be, what makes a conspiracy theory a conspiracy theory? So when we're talking about a conspiracy theory, what actually defines conspiracy versus a theory about conspiracies, or what we'd consider a conspiracy theory? So what do you think?
So, conspiracy theories, and the difference between that and a conspiracy. A conspiracy is conspiring to do something. You're basically putting out a plan to meet a goal. Usually that's like kind of big. It involves like governments or institutions, things like that. Whereas conspiracy theory is kind of just like, it's a theory about it, right? It's the idea that something is going on.
Okay.
That's how I would describe it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we have a bunch of like events that happen in history and in modern times, and a lot of the times there's a lot of confusion around that event because we can't like actually see what's going on and have every single detail. We don't have like a crystal ball into the future, and we weren't necessarily there when it happened. So it's maybe they revolve around like this idea of explaining that in some way or trying to clear up that confusion. Or using that confusion to present a theory, as you were saying, like they have a goal or they have like some sort of idea and they use the confusion around an event.
And I definitely agree with that. I think using the word theory in this instance is essentially, it's like when you use it in science, right? You have an idea of what's going to happen, you have an idea of what happened, and this is trying to explain why this happened or how it happened. And I think it's the same thing with conspiracy theories. Granted, they're a little more out there, a lot more out there, but you're coming up with a theory to explain something. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in general, is trying to explain the unexplainable, right? I think that's why we have religion. I think that's why we have science, regardless of how much of it's true or not. That's us explaining the things that we don't understand.
Really good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. So when thinking about conspiracy theories in general, are there different kinds? Because based on Michael Barkin is a political scientist at Syracuse University. And in 2003, he wrote a book about conspiracy theories. And that book was named The Culture of Conspiracy. And in it, he kind of defines a couple of different types of conspiracies. The first one would be like an event. So like an event happens, and people in that confusion or in the like chaos around that event, they start to make theories about it or how it happened.
Like 9/11.
Yeah, like 9/11. And then there's more like systemic conspiracies. So like organizations working against us,
Illuminati and things of that nature.
Okay. So what types of conspiracies have you kind of heard about, and how would you categorize those? What's one of your favorite ones, I guess?
I mean, one of the more interesting ones I think is definitely like the Freemasons, right? So the Freemasons are an actual group of people. I know a couple. I'm actually technically related to one of them. Like my great grandfather was a conspiracy theorist. We actually just found his Masonic ring not that long ago.
Okay.
Which was pretty cool. But so that one dates back forever ago. They like the Knights Templar kind of era.
Mm-hmm.
that one's a little bit different because you can say that all these things are attached to it. And a lot of people do. A lot of conspiracy theorists say that there's like crazy amounts of Satanism and like all kinds of things attached to it, even though it's like inherently a Christian like organization. It's a fraternity. That it's probably the most popular thing that has had anything with Freemasons in it would be like National Treasure. That's all about Freemasons, the whole all-seeing eye and all that kind of stuff, which actually also ties into the Illuminati. But that one's definitely more organizational. It's hard to say what's really at play there because a lot of people do then go and attach certain things. They'll attach Nazis to it. They'll attach just all kinds of crazy stuff. But who knows? So some of the more interesting event ones would be things like 9/11, and whether or not that was put on by the United States government, whether or not they actually did it. That's the argument there.
Yeah, there's like the Kennedy assassination,
Yeah,
right?
that's
where
where I was going to go to.
Did the CIA do Kennedy?
The mafia.
Mafia. Yeah.
And that one's super duper intriguing too because there's a lot of lines that you can draw as to why they would have wanted him dead, why the United States government would have wanted him dead, why the CIA would have wanted him dead, because he was fighting against things that they were trying to push for. And then all that stems around Cuba and the Cold War. And then tying directly into that is like the moon landing. A lot of people think that was fake and that Stanley Kubrick was actually like directed the set of the moon landing, and that there's evidence of it, or that he put out evidence of it in the Shining, which was a Stephen King book that they made into a movie. Great movie anyways, but
yeah, I mean, Stephen King, actually, if you think about it, so he wrote The Shining, and he also wrote, what is it, 11/23, 64?
I want to say it was 64.
63, 64?
63?
Yeah, it's like 11/23/63, I think. And that's based on a conspiracy for the Kennedy assassination. So this has kind of woven its way into society over the years, and I think people are very drawn to these things.
It's definitely a part of culture at this point, and more recently we've seen it a lot with like the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. That was you couldn't get on Facebook or Instagram without seeing something about Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. Like,
yeah, I mean,
couldn't escape it.
Yeah, people came up with some really interesting things, like arranging PS4 games to where it spelled out Epstein didn't kill himself.
That was my favorite one. I think I posted that.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So thinking about these conspiracies and how well they're ingrained into our society, how do you actually discredit one? Like, what are the things that make them so hard to discredit for people? Like, what do you think about that?
I think that a lot of times there's so much doubt and confusion around it anyways. So, and also you got to take into consideration that a lot of people who are thinking about these things, who like fully on buy into them and believe them, they're kind of off the rocker a little bit. You look at ones like, especially like flat Earth, right? Like the whole entire idea of that is that the Earth is flat and NASA's lying to us. And then they start going into things like Operation Paperclip, which is actually like well-founded. That's all true. We went and got scientists from Nazi Germany when we won World War II. And then those scientists came over and founded NASA. Like I forget the name of the gentleman who was the head of NASA, like the founder of it. I want to say it's the Simon Warrenthal, whoever owns the Museum of Tolerance. That guy's foundation has said that if the guy who founded NASA, it would be better if I remember names. The guy who founded NASA, if he was alive today, they would try him for war crimes because he was a Nazi. So
Simon Wiesenthal.
Yes, that's that he's got the foundation. He owns. I don't remember the NASA guy's name.
Okay.
But anyways, so they start tracing lines there. They're saying that Nazis are attached to NASA. That's part of the reason why they're lying to us. There's I believe they call it the ice wall that's supposedly around the entire perimeter of the flat Earth. They've got like they've got military, yeah, they've got military guards out there stationed to you know, and I have no idea how they're doing now with this whole thing going on, but like,
Yeah.
you have to like it gets silly, right? So, but there's people who like legitimately believe this. There was a guy who built a rocket ship to go up there and film it himself, right? He was going to shoot himself into the sky and film it. He did it once, but didn't get up high enough. That was like his test run. Second time he did it, he died. It didn't work out. So like,
He stayed on the ground.
yeah. But I think a lot of the thing is these people are semi crazy to begin with, and then also there's so much confusion around it anyhow. And I think that so the way that I look at these things is I don't know, right? I can't tell you for sure that the Earth isn't flat because I've never been around the entire Earth. A lot of the way that I like to equate it, you remember that Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show?
I haven't seen that in a really long time. But
so the premise of the movie, right, is there's this guy, Truman, who's born into this world, and his entire life is actually reality television. There's cameras everywhere. He doesn't know his family are actors, his girlfriend are actors, all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know until one day he starts getting paranoid about it, and then like there's this scene where he takes off in a boat and goes to the edge of the world, right, of his little area. Mm-hmm. And there's this wall that he like knocks on, and like he finds a door and walks out, and there's the rest of the world. He's like in some studio in LA. But if you don't know, if you've never seen these things with your own, eyes and touched them with your own hands, how do you know for sure? So proving a conspiracy theory wrong to somebody who actually full on believes in it is difficult because they're going to say that all the information that you're presenting them is fake. They're going to, they're just not going to want to believe it because they've already got a bias to not believe it.
Exactly. And that goes off of a couple different psychological terms that we use. Because, I mean, when you think about the idea of a conspiracy theory, you're thinking like somebody's trying to believe something. So we have to start looking at how the human mind processes beliefs. And a couple of different things that go into it is confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance. And so when you're thinking about confirmation bias, all this information that they're receiving, remember, they're confused about an event. There isn't a clear answer. Like there's no chain of causality to where like X equals Y. Like that's unclear. So what ends up happening is I think that confirmation bias kind of steps in, and all the information they're receiving is just like, yeah, I didn't trust this group to begin with. Now I'm hearing evidence that supports me not trusting them. So I'm going to believe that evidence. And then when presented with an alternative explanation, like, no, the moon landing really did happen because it would cost more to actually develop the special effects to fake the moon landing than it would cost to actually just build the rocket and send somebody up there. Which we already had the technology back then to do that. If you look at it from like an economic standpoint, it makes perfect sense why it wouldn't be a real thing, or why the moon landing would be a real thing and the hoax would not be a real thing. But that idea of cognitive dissonance, once you have internalized a belief, then when somebody challenges that belief, you dig your heels in and you say, no, this is what's real. And you see that all the time in our society. I mean, just based on our political beliefs, right? Like when you present somebody with a really strong argument and actual data and facts on something, a lot of times they'll just be like, it's irrelevant. Like whatever you try and say is fake. Right? The fake news cycle.
Because in their mind, you're already wrong. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess moving on from that, we could talk about something that impacts all people now, because I think in this country in particular, media has had a lot to do with shaping how we view our life, but even more so in other countries like China. I mean, they control everything. All the information that gets to somebody is controlled through media. So I guess, what do you think the roles that media plays in dissemination of these conspiracies, or backing up conspiracies, or helping to discredit them? Like, what do you think? What role does the media have in that?
I think when you talk about the media, especially with something like this, you have to look at it across a massive timeline, right? So, and actually, this also is a conspiracy theory, right? So back in the day, we just had newspapers, and so the start of yellow journalism was done by William Randolph Hearst, right? So the theory behind this one is that William Randolph Hearst owned the paper mills and he owned the newspapers. And around this time was when hemp, the cannabis plant, became more popular, and they were using it for everything back then. They were using it for they could make plastic out of it, they could make clothes out of it, and they were making paper out of it, rope, and So with the paper, the idea there is that William Randolph Hearst spread all this, what they call yellow journalism, via his newspapers, to basically say that the cannabis plant was terrible. They came up with a name that sounded bad, which was marijuana, which in Spanish directly translates to wild tobacco. And they gave it this, Latin sounding name, and they just made it sound terrible. And, they were saying that it was making people do all these things, go off and be criminals and rape people and blah, 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 all this terrible stuff. And so that's the idea of the yellow journalism there. So with media then, that was your only source of news. You only got that one thing. It was whatever was being okayed, essentially, to go down through the newspapers, and you form your own ideas about it. And I think that back then, society as a whole really took it to heart, and they were saying, these people wouldn't lie to us. We trust these people. And, you even look at it now, right? Like I remember growing up when we were kids, they would tell us, use credible sites, not like Wikipedia, it was use credible sites, things like newspapers and,
published books that were peer reviewed.
Right. So I think that was all well and good. That was fine. That worked for a while. I think now in the days of the internet, with how fast everything moves, newspapers are dying. Like that's a well-known fact. These sites are going away, and the newspapers themselves are already gone. But I think nowadays it becomes, it's less of a game of truth and more of a game of speed. It's how quick can we get out this information? How quickly can I say something on whatever terrible event just happened? As opposed to, let me vet everything. Let me get everything right, and then I'll, get it out and then tell people the truth. They don't care about it anymore. Journalism is dead. Mm-hmm. It's what matters is the story. It matters for clicks, and you can just tell that by the way articles are written now, by the titles, Mm-hmm. So I think that plays heavily into conspiracy theories now, not to mention social media and the fact that most of us are getting our news that way. Most of with this whole coronavirus thing going on, most of the news that I get is coming from Facebook. I then check it, but I mean, that's most people don't.
Yeah, they see something and that is truth to them,
and they spread it immediately.
And I mean, that's based off of it's really hard to be informed, and a lot of people don't realize that it takes actual time, time and understanding to sit there and go through a bunch of different sources. I mean, my students at home right now, they're sitting there. I'm giving them the sources because I took the time to go out and find them and bring it to them. That takes time, and time is a resource. And when you're thinking about the resource, like you were talking about journalism, the organizational model around media now has shifted drastically. Investigative journalism used to be a huge thing back in the 70s, 80s, because that was the only way you're going to find out about anything. But now, World Star, you're on camera, you can actually find these events and you can dig for yourself. And I think that in part makes conspiracy theories really hard to discredit and to root out because of that circular logic. Like, they have so much information that they just feed off of each other. So information's presented to them that doesn't match. It doesn't confirm what they already know. So it's cognitive dissonance, and they discard it and they say, well, because you're doing that, you're against us. You're trying to further the agenda of the globalists. And Yeah, it's
Shouts
circular.
out to Alex Jones there.
Yeah.
and he's a great example too of the media and putting things out there. Like, he wasn't always this guy that was, super duper heated and went on Joe Rogan's podcast and got all crazy. Like, there was a point in time where his information that he was providing was actually somewhat credible, or at least it seemed to be. But then, like, it just, I don't know if it's him or if it's the world around him, but whatever happened, things went crazy. And now, and Sandy Hook, and, he just, like, he goes crazy. Like, that's what got him canceled.
Turn the freaking frogs gay.
We've got the human pig hybrids over in China. It's the globalist Joe Rogan. But like, and that's the problem with that kind of stuff. And it even goes so far as to, like, when we were growing up, you could trust CNN, you can trust, you could trust Fox and MSNBC and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's not the case anymore.
They're just throwing things out there and working in the revision after it's already published, and hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. And it's just like, you just spread a bunch of misinformation.
Right.
Fix it in the back end, but like,
it doesn't matter.
Just told everybody the wrong thing. That'd be like walking out on stage and be like, "Hey, I'm Mario Lopez," and they'd be like, "What?"
Yeah, and then like 10 minutes later, after pretending to be Mario Lopez, like, by the way, I'm not Mario Lopez.
That'd be a great way to start a comedy show.
Yeah, but then you have to rely on people remembering who Mario Lopez is.
That's true. Like, do you remember that one random dance show that you didn't watch?
It was Saved by the Bell is where he came from, man.
See, I didn't know that.
It's because we're younger than that.
Yeah. I might keep this in, or I might cut this part. This is for me. This is for me. Okay. So, thinking about these things, how are they maybe dangerous in society? Because just from a personal standpoint, I'm not a big believer in conspiracy theories. I think that conspiracies certainly do happen. I think that they're definitely provable. As we were talking about a little bit before we recorded this, Desert Storm, or not Desert Storm, but the first Gulf War, right?
Yeah.
And then various things throughout history, we've been able to kind of uncover and say, oh, there's actually some truth to this. There's maybe a kernel of truth to whatever it is they're talking about. It's never as grandiose as like, oh, wow, they uncovered a huge plot. But if you think about the Watergate scandal, like, that was a conspiracy. And then they proved it, that it was actually happening. So when thinking about that, these things are real and they can actually uncover things, but they can also be kind of dangerous because of the sentiments they might invoke in populations. For instance, with the Rothschild. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Rothschild conspiracy theory, basically it posits that there is this globalist Zionist force, or the Jewish people, that control the banking system, and they try and tank whole countries, and they control everybody. But what that's led to is kind of white supremacists here in America taking hold of that and doling out anti-Semitism, which is hatred of Jewish people. In fact, one of my cousins, I found out that he's an anti-Semite, and he believes in all this stuff. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it's like, I could give you over 9 million reasons why you're wrong. And I want you to go to Washington, D.C. and go up to the Holocaust Museum and look to see why you're wrong about every single thing that you believe in. But, it can be very damaging. Some of these conspiracies is what I'm getting at. So what do you think about that?
I think you're very right. And honestly, that's a big problem with like a lot of the conspiracy theories, is that a lot of them are rooted in anti-Semitism. Especially when you start talking about Rothschilds and all that kind of stuff, it really does get to be dangerous. And I think that's the problem. I think that it becomes fuel for the fire of hate a lot of times. And that goes so far as to even, things like shooters, right? Like, who go and do these terrible acts of killing lots of people, like the one in was in Pittsburgh.
The Tree of Life Synagogue.
Yeah, like just terrible things like that. And beyond that, you have to look at what are these people who believe in these things, especially the ones who have a platform, like Alex Jones, for instance. What are they putting out to people that don't know any better? What are they, so some kid walks into, his buddy's house, right? And his dad's got something playing or whatever. Like, how does that affect them? Where does that lead them? Does that take them on a trajectory that they wouldn't, even like us doing this, little discussion here to your students? What doors does that open? Because, there's going to be one of them at least who gets curious and who looks at these things. And I think that really does become dangerous because, a lot of these people's minds aren't fully formed. And that's whether we're talking about children or we're talking about adults, because adults are just as gullible as anybody else. And that's definitely something that I've always tried to take into consideration when I start looking into this stuff. Because I remember being a kid, and the whole Illuminati thing was really popular, like our early high school years. And I remember, like you were looking for all the black squares and triangles, and Jay-Z's over there throwing up the triangle and stuff, and you start looking at these things, and it was really, really easy to find, like you said, confirmation bias. You're looking for things that fit what you're looking for already. So like it's easy to convince yourself of it. I think that it becomes especially dangerous when somebody who has essentially like bad thoughts in their mind already finds these things. Somebody who wants to do bad things, somebody who wants to harm people, somebody who wants to go shoot up a school or bomb a synagogue. That is especially when it's a problem, because they're just, like I said, fueling the fire of hate that they already have. And then I think it's also especially dangerous when you're spreading it to people who maybe wouldn't have otherwise heard of it. But
which maybe we're doing right now.
Right. But, at the same time, like, the reason why I look at them and why I get interested in conspiracy theories and why I listen to podcasts about conspiracy theories is because for me personally, I like to be open to just about everything. I've read pretty much every major religion's book. I try to keep myself open. If there's a movie by a director that I don't like, I'll still watch it. If there's a song I've never heard that somebody tells me you should listen to this, I'll still listen to it. I try not to close myself off to anything, because I never want to miss that thing that will change my mind. But conspiracy theories can be inherently dangerous because they can change your mind into something that might not be right.
Yeah. And I think that stresses the overall importance of an education and being able to discern things for yourself and being able to see what a credible source is. Like a lot of people that prescribe to like flat earth or hollow earth, as you were telling me earlier. These people don't know anything about physics. They don't know anything about astrophysics. They don't understand what they're doing. And I mean, it's very simple for a physicist who's been studying this their entire life to get on there and be like, yeah, you're wrong. This is why you're wrong. But if they don't have the base level of education, if they don't have a base level understanding, and then somebody there with the proper discourse to be like, well, you see, what is it going to take for you to come my way? What is the one fact that makes you believe in this version of history rather than this version of history? And most people don't have the skills to, have that conversation.
Yeah. And a lot of them are also so solidified in their views that there isn't that one fact that'll change your mind.
Exactly.
They already think it. They already believe it. Like I told you earlier, I really truly think that there's a similarity between believing in like a conspiracy theory and believing in any sort of religion or anything else for that matter. Once you believe in that thing, it is very hard to change your mind.
Confirmation. Right?
Yeah, I make we grew up Catholic, right? I remember talking to my mom one time, and we were talking. I don't remember what religion we were talking about, but she said, just how can they believe that? And it's like, well, you believe that a virgin gave birth to the Son of God,
like walked on water and
walked on water,
like fish and
yeah. But you grew up with that.
Yeah.
It was ingrained in you from the time that you were born. it's almost the same thing with any of this other kind of stuff. Obviously you're not usually ingrained with conspiracy theories, but from the time that you're born, but
Some
you
people are.
see, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to know what that's like.
Well, that's, I mean, if we've been talking about all this, some of those real dangers is like Nazism, white supremacy. Like the reason people get into that normally is not because they just, happen to wander in. There's probably a small portion of people involved, but a lot of it's like indoctrination, or that idea that your family believes something, therefore you believe it, and you go your entire life. And that's really hard to combat, because I mean, you could go through and you could explain to them why what they're saying is damaging, why what they believe is incorrect based on science, based on actual observable facts. But at the end of the day, it's what they believe. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. We're going to go ahead and sign off here. So thank you, and have a great day.
All right. Thanks, you too.